Hello, and welcome to the Postpartum Years podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ellen Kramp. I am a physical therapist and a pelvic health specialist. And today we are talking birth stories and postpartum stories. And I have Stacey Gayer with me. She is also a pelvic physical therapist. So, welcome, Stacey.
Happy to be here.
All right. So, tell me, let's start with your birth story.
I am a holistic pelvic health physical therapist, very interested in mind, body, spirit, and live my life that way for my whole life. And so I searched for a midwife. I was in Pennsylvania. I'm from the DMV, but I was in Pennsylvania and sought out a midwife in a birthing center. Loved the midwife I found at the Valley Birthplace in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. And my pregnancy was amazing. But and I mentioned Mary Ellen before the recording that I'm writing a full-length book now about my bipolar journey. So I'm bipolar, so I'm considered high-risk pregnancy, but was not unfortunately treated that way. So it was kind of like a science experiment, me getting pregnant. I was on birth control like a lot of women. When I don't remember if it was off the birth control. I'm pretty sure off the birth control or off the lithium. I was on lithium, which is considered a miracle drug, which actually toxified my kidneys after 10 years. But luckily, what they know now with mental health issues and postpartum and bipolar with pregnancy is so different than when my daughter was born in 2000. So I was pregnant in 1999. And I really was headstrong about a midwife, and I wasn't really in psychiatric care. And I had an amazing pregnancy because estrogen and hormones are amazing, and I had an amazing pregnancy. But unfortunately, the woman that I sought out had a laminectomy. She had lumbar surgery in the middle of my pregnancy. And so I ended up with another midwife, which was fine, but I was 2 weeks late. And my pregnancy was amazing. I loved being pregnant. Loved, loved, loved. Happy, happy camper as a pregnant woman, exercised all the way through. And, but then she was 2 weeks late, and they tried, the amnio hook and all the stuff. And I ended up in a hospital with a C-section because she was actually transverse. I don't know if your listeners know what that means, but like basically her head was cocked into the right side of my pelvis. So she wasn't coming down on my cervix to dilate me. So I ended up with a C-section. So postpartum, my daughter will be 25 December 30th. Healthy, happy, I'm healthy, happy now too. But it was quite a roller coaster ride. There is that backdrop of the bipolar, but I know a lot of women in my practice and just friends and family and in the general public who do suffer from postpartum depression. But I was kind of fine breastfeeding, was not advised to go back on any medication of my own fault, or, I just was not. And 6 months into breastfeeding and being a new mom, which is challenging, I went into a full-blown psychosis. 3 days where I did not sleep. And, this is all going in this book that I'm writing about the journey, because it was not just the postpartum. There have been multiple episodes and stuff. The thing that landed me in the hospital was thought my ex-husband was going to kill us, and walked out with the baby in the rain and thought he had a knife. And then all of a sudden I hear a siren of an ambulance coming, and they took me to the hospital. And I had spent like 3 days not sleeping, and we were trying to manage it from home. And I ended up in the University of Pennsylvania hospital for a while. And then my mom came up and said, I'm not letting my daughter be separated from her baby. And this is a long story, so I don't know how much you want to
okay.
hear. It's
As
quite
much as you want to
dramatic.
share.
It's quite
Yeah.
dramatic, and this is part of what's going in my book because I want women to know who, I'm not the only person with bipolar or mental health
Right.
issues.
Exactly.
So yeah, so my mom said I'm not having my daughter separated from my baby, and this is another piece in my book is, you know, psych hospitals, the ones that are just associated with hospitals, are often just holding places so you are safe. And my mom argued with the older uh, resident, not resident, the residents were all in agreement. Give the lady the daughter and the baby. Give the lady the daughter and the baby. And the older guy who was the attending was saying, no, you must stay. And she said, my mom was in the healthcare field. She goes, give me the AMA form. Give me the against medical advice form. I'm signing it. I'm taking my daughter. So thank God I had a cheerleader of my mother. And she took me back to Maryland. And then for a year and a half, I spent living with her, and basically my mom and my stepdad took care of my you know, infant, which was really heart-wrenching. And at the time, I didn't have that cognitive awareness of like, oh, I'm separated from my child. But now we're still mending from my illness and from that. And I do craniosacral work. I don't know,
Hmm.
Mary Ellen, are you familiar with that?
I am trained in that too.
Oh, cool. We have a lot of parallels. So it's so interesting. Jump forward, doing this work. Both my daughter and I are in therapy, and I was in a study group for craniosacral, and they were doing an SER, which is a somatic emotional release. And I was going to write this story in this book, but I wrote a different story. I'll keep this brief too. But basically, there was a couple people around me, and I was on the table, and we were doing a study group, and he just lifted my leg, and I literally started to hysterically cry. And I literally felt like the balloon, the blueberry girl from
Mm. Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka, and I was like pregnant again. I literally felt like my body just felt pregnant. My legs went up in the air, and I literally was birthing her through the birth canal. And I was just crying and crying and crying and crying, and I was back in all the birth trauma and the everything. And then they kind of, settled me down, and I was able to go home. And then the next day, I woke up and I felt like this 100-pound backpack had been lifted from
Hmm.
my body. And I don't think every ounce of guilt has dissipated, but after that, I was like, it let me off the hook for having the C-section that I didn't want. Just shifted the paradigm in my mind. All of that guilt of not being there for your child and not having the birth that you want. And it was pretty miraculous just in an hour, and then waking up the next day and having this uh, big weight
Yeah.
lifted.
Yeah. That was one thing I had noticed. I had had two vaginal births, and I had a very, very emergency C-section for the third one. And I had gone through 20 hours of labor. And then her heart rate was dropping. So I got rushed over to the OR, and they got her out. But one thing I just have not heard before, and just the occasional patient I've heard it from, is like the incompleteness that you can feel by going through that emergency C-section. Like I didn't feel like there was just an incompleteness to the birth of that child. And I don't know if it's part of it was because I had to be knocked out for that particular C-section because she was in distress. And it was that level emergency C-section that, is like, okay, general anesthesia, get the baby out now. Um, that I felt like I hadn't delivered her. But you know, that incompleteness of that delivery. Um, I don't hear very often, and it was interesting to hear that from you too, where you felt like, part of your body had to kind of go through that process.
Yeah, and so I share parts of this with my clients, when it's appropriate, in terms of
Hmm.
like people with,
Right.
I'm not going to tell them my birth story as they're pregnant and get them worried about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But
No,
but
no, no.
also what I tell people too, and you kind of touted this for your podcast and your book, was, you know, you can be 6 months postpartum, or you can be 6 years or 12 years or 20
40
years
years.
postpartum.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know where you are, but I'm about to be 25 years, and I still get from her, and I believe this, like I believe, like I know my name, that her, head being cocked in the right side of my pelvis. I always have this like flare up of my right SI and like some of the muscles above there. And it's interesting because I don't. It sounds like you might do the similar work, but I do mind body spirit work where whenever I'm stressed or some emotion comes up, like we have our spots, and
Hmm.
that's the biggest spot of mine, and I teach my clients too. Like I end up working in the front to relieve the back. And if I work on some of the front tightness in the fascia there, it kind of helps that. But it's also like working out the emotional triggers that
Hmm.
flare up the body.
Yeah. So for some people who are just listening and not quite understanding what we're talking about, um, there's there are theories out there that the emotions necessarily aren't held only within the brain, that they can be held within the tissues as well. And as manual therapists, we see this all the time where we're working on an area and suddenly somebody will start crying, or memories will come flooding back. Sometimes they'll have it as dreams later on that day or within the week or after a treatment, or they'll just find themselves crying a lot afterwards or very sleepy, very drained. Um, and there's newer research out there, and I've got to find it. I heard it recently on Maya Bialik's podcast. And she was talking to somebody who was actually researching at the cellular level memory, which I'm like, I've got to find this research. This is so fascinating. This is like, it's just confirmation of things that I've been feeling in my hands and seeing with patients for years and years. But yeah, when you talk about, emotions being held within the tissues, like a particular trauma that happened, um, as you're, an emotional trauma that happened at the same time you're having a physical trauma, that those tissues are kind of getting a double whammy between the emotional and the physical aspects of that same trauma.
You've heard that. We've both heard the issues are in the tissues, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
but
and we see that.
we'll have to get with each other on that because there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research
Yeah,
on the fact that our consciousness and our memories and our trauma are held in the cellular and the fascia in our body.
yeah. And it's just so it's, when I was first hearing that, I remember the first time I took a craniosacral course. And of course, very Western trained PT, I was very much in my little box, as a Western trained PT, but I took my first craniosacral course, went through the 4 days of training with that for that first course. And the woman teaching the course wore like really flowy skirts and Birkenstocks with socks. And um, like at 4 o'clock that afternoon on the fourth day, she goes, well, and she talks about the emotions being held in the tissues. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to dismiss this, but the emotions are held in the brain. And this woman, like maybe, you know, just is a little too far out there for me. But um, I just thought, okay, this is really far out there. I'm not going to completely dismiss it. I'm trying to stay open, but I no. And my very first patient, 8 a.m. Monday morning, I get back. She had been in a car accident, had low back pain, which I was treating her for the car accident. She had broken her ankle in this car accident, and her ankle was in a boot. So, of course, I want to do like all the techniques I just learned in the course that I spent 4 days in. And I'm holding her ankles, just stopping the craniosacral rhythm, letting things reorganize. So, from the patient perspective, I'm just holding her ankles. The woman starts in with the ugly cry. I mean, she is out of control crying, and I'm just holding. I'm not pulling. I'm not doing anything to her ankle. I'm just holding, and she's ugly crying. She is just going, I'm sorry, I'm crying, but I don't know why, and I can't stop. And I'm just thinking to myself, I believe, I believe, I believe.
Absolutely. One and done, right?
Yeah,
When did you go to that cranial course?
that was back in the 90s. It was
Mm,
probably 96, 97 that I took
mhm.
that cranial
Mhm.
class.
Mhm.
But that was, those lessons came hard and fast, learning some of these manual techniques between the craniosacral therapy. I also do visceral work and, same fascial connective tissue stuff that is really charged. And um, yeah, it's pretty amazing work, and the emotional stuff that comes out with these people is pretty incredible.
Ditto. Ditto. I do the
Yeah.
cranial the I started with Barnes in 1999, and now I've kind of gravitated away from that, and I do a lot of craniosacral work and visceral work. I've done a lot of the Baral work. So
Hmm.
yeah, and this past July I took with Susan Surlock. You know who she is?
No, I don't.
Yeah, she's been doing it for like 40 years, teaching for the institute. I did my SER one with her, and yeah, and then I did just recently Michael Morgan's work, who's working with prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's and dementia, which is not really relevant to your podcast, but all the work, all the manual work is really super powerful for me. I get it myself, and do it with my clients.
Hmm. Yeah. So how did things progress with the postpartum stuff with you?
I got stabilized. I got back into work. Um, like I said, 2010, I became a pelvic floor person, started a pelvic health program at a hospital from 2010 to 2017. And, I think you might agree. I don't know. I can't put words in your mouth, but each person I have my hands on or in the presence of, it's like I'm healing because I'm getting work done, but also when I work on someone else, it's just another level of healing for me. And
Mm,
we are not the healers or the teachers or the whatever. I feel like I'm a facilitator, and I learn every day from somebody who walks through the door. And
hmm.
what do they say when the teacher is ready, the student will come, or the student will come when the teacher is ready. And I'm constantly healing. That's my kind of journey for lifetimes. And I'm learning from my patients all the time. And I wanted to share this with you because it might be something that you want to do together. Is I don't know why, I think in the last week or two before you even, or before or after you contacted me for this, I really want to encourage my women friends and clients to celebrate their birth day. When I send a message to someone, like a little text or something, I'll write, when I know it's their kid Elliot's birthday, I'll say, "Happy birthday to you, Mama," and like and healing these birth traumas, because having a baby, like, inside your belly, like whether you have a C-section or a vaginal birth, and it, like you said at the very beginning of the podcast, smooth and easy and everything went well and no postpartum depression, but just the fact of having your uterus grow and a baby inside of you just pushes, like, as visceral people, um,
Hmm.
visceral means the organs, like everything's, you know moved
Getting
around
smushed.
and displaced, and then you just have the baby and you're supposed to be like, okay, everything's fine, but
6 weeks later, everything's
yeah, it's
great.
fine, and you can go lift your baby who gets wiggly giggly, and your core is supposed to like just all of a sudden respond, and that kind of thing. So I'm still working on my core, and I've been to pelvic floor therapy. I mean, if we're going to be honest, with bladder stuff, I think from the pregnancy and the C-section, and I'm lucky enough to be a manual therapist, so my C-section has gotten a ton of work, but sometimes, I don't know about you, Mary Ellen, but we have to give it over. And
Hmm.
having work ourselves, like we can't bring anybody where we haven't been,
Hmm.
and whether it's trauma of a birth or other trauma that I've had, um, I found a therapist from the Institute up in Frederick, who I go to every couple of weeks for craniosacral, and she literally worked on me like a month ago, I would say. And we work on we work together on me. Like she says, okay, what do you think about this? And tune into inside your body. What are you feeling? And then I go, can I put my hand here with you putting your hand there? And one of the sessions, which is really relevant to this postpartum thing, is the next day. And you tell your clients, like, you might have pain afterwards, or you might have this or that. Everybody wants to just feel better, right? And I still have that right SI thing. She was working all into my right hip and right on some ligaments on the uterus. And the next day, I'm 57, proudly. And I haven't had a period in years. And literally the next day, 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, she worked me on Tuesday. I was having like period cramps. And most people be like, oh my God, like what's going on? But I was like, she must have released some ligament in or fascia in my belly near the uterus. And it was stuck from 25 years ago, maybe,
Hmm.
and so I'm still in recovery. I'm not
Hmm.
in pain, but I'm
Right.
just healing the body so my core can work, and I can work and help people and exercise and have a healthy life. But it's just amazing how 25 years later, there's still that restriction or
Hmm. Yeah.
area, and it was emotional too for me, by the
Hmm.
way. Very emotional, the work there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It it's not 6 weeks.
No, no, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. And just, can I get on a soapbox for 1 second about
Sure.
that? Um, I had a client, I use this example all the time just because it gives a very hard example, who's from France, and she worked for the World Bank. And she was way postpartum, and I've been working pelvic floor with her. And but she said that right after her pregnancies in the hospital, whether you had a tear or leakage or anything, there was a pelvic floor PT at that moment right after you birthed. And
Hmm.
in Europe, they know what they're doing, right? I'm not dissing the American system on a podcast,
I
but
will.
okay, okay, good, good, good. Yeah. Well, women's health research is really gone, and the postpartum care is just awful, awful. And we need it right away. Like whether
Hmm.
you have an issue or not.
Need it beforehand too.
Oh, the two, right? Prehab. No, I do that in my practice. I called it, yeah, prehab for pregnancy, because
Hmm.
you're getting ready for an Olympic event.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if pre, during, and post.
Yeah. I was talking to a Belgian PT this weekend, and she was saying in Belgium, they have 14 or 15 treatments while pregnant and 14 or 15 treatments postpartum. Everybody.
It should be
And
standard
here,
operating procedure.
yeah, here for 20 years, I've been talking with different OBs. It's much better in the DC area here, but in Florida where I was, oh my gosh, when I first started in 2005, the midwives in the area had said, "Don't even bother talking to the OBs in this area because they are super conservative and they won't send any patients to you." And I was watching it
Wow.
transform over the
Wow.
last 20 years. So we're getting more and more, but it's still, one of the OBs I spoke with said, "Oh, the babies, a woman who's had a baby over 9 pounds, those are definitely going to PT." And I'm like, how about one who's had a baby,
How about
regardless of the
everybody?
size?
How about
Like,
everybody?
yeah, I had a patient who had a 5 pounder, and just the way that 5 pounder was arranged, she ended up with a grade 4 tear, a fourth degree tear, because of the way the 5 pound baby was, how she was asynclitic and the way she delivered. It
Maybe
tore
you can
her.
say what asynclitic is to your
She was
listeners.
not in a good position. She wasn't, usually the baby should be head down, face toward the sacrum. And however she came out, it was not in that alignment, and it was not good. And that poor woman really tore with that particular delivery. So, there's this myth that, if the incision heals, the person's fine. And there's so much more that needs to be done to get that pelvic floor
Yeah,
working normally
yeah.
again.
And I have these women in my practice who, I can think of a couple, right? Boom, somebody I'm treating right now. She's in her 60s and she's getting recurrent UTIs. And we're boiling it down to some scar tissue that we're working in her pelvic floor because she's been treated for UTI and no bacterial infection. Her local doctor sends people to me, and we've been working on her tight pelvic floor and the scar tissue there from 40 years ago. That if she had done right, like when it healed, her whole pelvic floor and her core would have been completely different.
Hmm.
And when you start there, like think about all the money and time and all these things that would have prevented,
Right.
all these
All
different
these problems. Hmm.
prolapse and urinary urgency. And I wonder what the statistics are on rise of gynecological surgeries as well, because that's happening a lot more frequently.
Well, at least the awareness is coming up
I think you're
on
right.
some
It
of
is.
that.
It is. It is. It really is. So we have to give kudos to that. There's a lot more publication, but I work with men too. And I was interviewed like a year or two ago, and they're like, there's two men that are interviewing me, and they're like, "Oh, do I have a pelvic floor too?" They didn't even know they had a pelvic floor.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's not an isolated. I know we're talking just about women and postpartum, but humans have pelvic floors, and I was going to say too, when you were saying about the 5 pound baby, anybody who carries anything inside their belly is stretching out their abdominal wall. And then
Hmm.
you're delivering through a C-section or through your vaginal canal, and you know, it's it's a trauma. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter how
Yeah.
big the baby is, whether you tear or not. Like
Hmm.
it needs to be, we need to care for our women like we care for somebody after an accident or
Right.
a stroke or any kind of broken arm or whatever it is. It's still, it should be treated that way.
And not waiting 6 weeks to start to treat it. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
talking to the docs, because there's no research to say it needs to be 6 weeks. Again, Europe, they're seeing their women immediately postpartum. We see total knee patients same day as they had
Right.
surgery.
Right. You can start
Um,
breathing. You can start being aware of teaching them how to move. There's so many things we can do.
hmm. Yeah. Well, hopefully, we'll keep pushing the narrative and get some more research and show what we can do as PTs in this realm. And OTs, because there are a lot of pelvic OTs out there
Yeah,
as
there are
well.
a lot of, I know a lot locally, and there are a lot of OTs to
Yeah.
do pelvic. I just hope there's more research and more awareness and more support mentally, physically for women, prepartum, peripartum, postpartum. And I also want to just put a plug in for vaginal topical estrogen. I don't know how is that for.
Throw it in there. Throw it in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Talk
yeah.
about
Thank you, Dr. Rachel Rubin. I'm giving her a little
Yes.
kudos here. She was in the building next to me until she moved to Bethesda. So I shadowed with her when I first moved back into town. And, you know, it's kind of like now with the changing of the FDA, the label in the,
Yeah. Taking the black box and running
that
off of estrogen.
I'm
Yeah.
telling women, you know, when you're breastfeeding, you are in a menopausal state in your vaginal tissues, and you need to be on it then. And then right, you know, in your late 30s, 40s, like start it then. I started all that stuff, HRT and the topical estrogen in my mid 50s, because that's when I found out about it, and I wish I had done it 10 years earlier. So, you know, start the conversations with your doctor, give them grace. They weren't trained, but this stuff is out there, and it's not expensive, and it's going to change your life. And then one last thing is, I watched over Thanksgiving is something called the Pink Pill. It was a documentary that Ruben was in, and Sarah Signa,
Oh,
who's
nice.
at GW. And I'm not sure how to stream it because I'm going to find out, but I streamed it till the 30th. So I had a little party at my house watching the Pink Pill. It's called Addie, and it's for libido for women. And there's 26 drugs for men for sexual dysfunction. And this was the first drug for women. And they put up the hugest fight at the FDA, and they finally got it approved. And this film is a documentary about how hard all these doctors and lawyers worked to get women's health put on in as a priority.
Nice. Nice. All right. So thank you very much for joining me, Stacey. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope women out there are going to understand the effects of bipolar and postpartum depression psychosis just a little bit better. And maybe somebody might be able to get some help because you shared. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Yeah, I'm coming out with a full-length book about the whole thing. It's not just the postpartum, but it's about the bipolar journey, and it's a caregiver tool book. So I hope,
Awesome.
look out for that in 26, 27. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an important area. And so thank you so much for doing the work you do with
Thank
people
you.
individually and doing the book and the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. We'll see you next time on the Postpartum Years.